Hello and welcome back. In this video, I just wanted to take a look at the differences between Stencyl and Construct 2 as 2D game development work environments or game engines. So the thing about these two game engines, Stencyl and Construct 2, is that they target a very similar market. They target largely entry-level game developers, people who are sort of taking their first steps into the world of game development. They're only for 2D game development, not 3D game development. If you're interested in getting involved in 3D game development, then we can talk about Unity 3D, which is sort of the de facto game engine of the industry at the moment. There are also other options like UDK and CryEngine and all of that, but we're focusing on 2D game development right now. So coming into the browser to just look at the websites here for a second, I have Stencyl.com up, of course the homepage for Stencyl, and then on my other tab I have Siro.com, which is the homepage for Construct 2. So first question I'm going to address that a lot of people have: which is more powerful? Well, I can say with 100% certainty that Stencyl is a lot more powerful than Construct 2. That's contrary to the opinions that you may have seen expressed by other developers, other people who've worked with the software. But when you've worked with both extensively, then you see the difference. Stencyl can handle a much higher workload. It can render a lot more sprites, it can handle a lot more physical interactions and maintain a constant, steady and strong frame rate, whereas Construct 2 cannot. Now, in fairness to Construct 2, it's not a criticism of the software or of the developers, it's just a limitation of the software and its nature, because it is designed purely for HTML5. Now, I know that HTML5 is a very popular technology at the moment, and I understand why that is, because it's inherently cross-platform, which is really cool, and it's just the latest technological buzz term. There's an awful lot of impetus, an awful lot of motion moving towards this world of HTML5 for app development and games and everything else. But the thing is that HTML5 is not native code, and no matter how popular it becomes as a concept and as a technology, it never will be native code, and so it will never run as fast as native code runs. And this is why Stencyl is, and always will be, a more powerful game engine than Construct 2, because Stencyl compiles all of your project to native code for each target platform. I'm talking Windows, I'm talking Mac, I'm talking Linux, I'm talking Android, and I'm talking iOS, all of the big hitters. It compiles down to native code so it runs fast. Whereas with Construct 2, if you took an equivalent project you'd worked with in Stencyl and tried to run it in Construct 2, you would probably see a lot of lag. This is something that I've personally experienced. That said, I'm not saying you should not use Construct 2. In fact, it may be better to start with that, and I'll show you a little bit of the two interfaces just to make this clear. When we go into Construct 2, what you're going to see is something that is reminiscent of your standard sort of software interface that you'd expect to see. You know, you have your ribbons, and then you have your simple kind of windows, layout, panels. Everything is laid out in a way that you're probably accustomed to seeing in other software programs. And then when it comes to creating code and what have you, let's create like a new project, or rather I'll show you one of my own projects, Run and Shoot, which is for a course that I'm working on. Very simply, you have a layout or a canvas area where you can put in tileable sprites, or you can put in just standalone sprites, and then you have an event sheet, and in here you visually just build out the logic to handle every single event and every single possible behavior within the game. Now, the pros and the cons for Construct 2 on this observation that we're making. Firstly, it's great when you're starting out, because you only have one place to go to create your logic. You go to your event sheet to create your logic, and the process of creating that is very simple, so it's brilliant at the start. But when you start trying to create more complex games with more advanced and intricate behaviors and interactions and all of that stuff, then suddenly this simplicity becomes a hindrance. And that's when we come to Stencyl. My advice basically is that you experiment with Construct 2 if you're just sort of testing the waters with game development. But if you really want to do something interesting, then Stencyl is the way to go. And I teach several Stencyl courses. May as well plug that while we're having this discussion. But I've developed and published entire games with Stencyl, and many people have developed popular games with Stencyl. So it's a great game engine and it's very powerful. But with Stencyl, if I just open up one of my projects here, the logic isn't handled with an event sheet. It's handled with behaviors. You have actor and scene behaviors. So actor behaviors are attached to actors, and the correspondingly scene behaviors are attached to scenes. But it's a close correlation with actual coding, because you use this block snapping interface and you have a whole sort of a library of blocks over here with different meanings, and they can all be interconnected in various ways. And that power, it goes far beyond what's possible with Construct 2 and the event sheets. It has to be said plainly. That's just the case. Construct 2 is a great game engine for its purpose, and if you have programming skills, then you can write code and you can do all kinds of interesting things with it that some programmers do. But the main target audience is newcomers and people who probably don't have very much programming experience, and so you're limited when you're trying to go beyond just the basics. But in Stencyl, there's an enormous power at your fingertips once you learn how to work with the behavior system, creating the behaviors with logic blocks. So two game engines, both targeting the same audience, and they both provide something really powerful and really cool. They can both be used to develop professional games, but the differences are very clear, and I hope that you've gotten that from this. Just to summarize, Construct 2 is a simpler interface, which is great for starting out, but Stencyl, although it might seem like an unfamiliar interface, once you've climbed that wall, it's a much more powerful beast. In terms of pricing, one of the great advantages with Construct 2 is that once you've purchased it, you have it for life. It's a once-off payment, and it's pretty reasonable. So it's not going to cost you a fortune. If I click on the store page here, I'll just show you their pricing structure. Now, the personal license is very reasonable, $99.99, and that's a one-time payment. And the business license is a little higher, that's $23.29, but you only have to upgrade to a business license if you're earning over a certain threshold, and it's quite a high threshold. So you have that once-off payment, whereas with Stencyl there's a subscription in essence. There's a yearly fee. You have to pay once the year is expired. You have to pay once again, so that you can still use the software. But that's justified because what Stencyl does is unique, and it is incredibly powerful. Okay, well, if you've enjoyed this, and if you're not already following my channel, then please just click the subscription link on screen now. Thank you.